So we saw that Jenna is not going to be able to make it today. Um, Reva, did you hear from anybody else in that regard?
I haven't, no, just from Jenna. So I think we should probably wait a few minutes for folks because I haven't heard that anyone else will be out today.
Great. Let's just give it a little bit longer. We don't have a too aggressive agenda today, so we should be able
No,
to get pretty well.
sounds good.
And we're set up for the presentation from, is that Kelsey? Are you doing that presentation?
Yes, sir. That's me.
Great. Okay. Looking forward to hearing it. It's an interesting topic. So we got Jane, it looks like.
Hi, everyone.
Eliza Jane. All right.
Yeah.
They're rolling in.
They sure are, and we have a quorum, so we're good for today. We have 5 members.
Great. Is that a quorum? 5 is all?
Yeah, that's correct.
I
5
don't know.
members.
Something makes me think that Mark Stern was not going to be here, but I can't remember specifically. Well, I think we got enough to get started then. So I'll actually start. I want to hear what everybody's up to, but I'm going to start myself because I just got back from a really exciting trip up to Eliza Jane country.
What?
Yeah.
What?
I horse packed into Eagle Cap Wilderness for 5 days. It was just phenomenal. I mean, one of the great things about this committee is we get to do projects all around the state, and we've done some work up in that area. And Eliza Jane, you probably know the Del Sol Outfitters there. Yeah, so we went into their camp and on the East Fork of the Lostine River, and just had it's an amazing place, beautiful, lots of brook trout, saw elk, got caught in a magnificent thunderstorm right on the top of the ridge between the East Fork and the main fork of the Lostine, and it was just a spectacular experience. Tons of wildflowers. Eliza Jane, you live in a phenomenal place.
I do. I'm grateful for it too.
And also got a great breakfast burrito at this little place with a Volkswagen Bug tacked onto the side of the building.
Right.
In Lostine.
The blue banana.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So anyway, we thought of you while we were up there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed you.
Yeah. Well, we were in and out of there. One thing you need, Eliza Jane, is electric car charger, a fast charger somewhere up there.
Yeah.
Because we had to like sneak in and sneak out to get it back to La Grande where there's a decent charger. So, I mean, actually, it's just something that would for you to consider talking about getting a fast charger up there.
Well, I know Wallowa Resources has a few of them in front of their building. I don't know if they're fast or not, but
Yeah, they take overnight to charge.
oh,
It's nice to have them, but
Yeah.
that's good. So with that, Eliza Jane, let's hear your side of the story of what's going on in that part of the country.
Well, yesterday was our 3rd annual meat rodeo here at the ranch. So we had about 50 people here, 5 teams, cooking burgers and server obstacle course and trivia, and it's just a blast. It's a cocktail contest, so I survived that, and The good news daily before that is that the Nez Perce Fisheries are still bringing us spawning Chinook every day and putting them in the river behind the house. So that's pretty
Wow.
awesome. What's that?
Wow. So they're taking spawn Chinook and put them in the creek?
Yeah, they show up at the ones that show up at the hatchery. Any extras at the end of the day, the next morning they bring them here and put them into the river behind the bridge, over the bridge. Yeah, it's so exciting. I think at least 120 so far have been put in here. So I haven't found any reds yet, but they tell me they're not quite settled into that. It'll probably be a couple more weeks. So yeah, it's
Have you had salmon in there spawning before?
yes, every year they've been doing this. And actually, when we finished our project 20 years ago, it took about 30 days for the Chinook to show up after we finished it. So
Oh,
it
wow.
always gives me great hope and encouragement. When you build it, they will come.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wonderful. So I'm still bugging everybody I can to bring us some lamprey, but getting closer probably. So yeah, and just busy as heck on the ranch. Just
Wow.
busy and thankful not to be on fire. We're surrounded and with things burning, and it causes a lot of anxiety all the time. Just we had thunderstorms roll through, but we got some rain, and yeah, it's affecting everyone. So
Yeah, that thunderstorm I was talking about caused a fire one valley over,
yeah,
but it ended up not spreading much, so that was good.
yeah, the Minam is burning up there
Oh, man.
right now, but yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Liza Jane.
Yeah, it's great to see everybody too. Really nice.
Yeah, it's nice seeing everybody. Brett, what's going on with you?
Well, just enjoying the summer, trying to stay out of the smoke. It's been smoky here, even though we don't have any fires, miraculously. There's like a force field over Sisters, but all around us, there's fires. And it's been beautiful up in the high country right now. There isn't many mosquitoes, and the yellow jackets haven't started yet. So it's a great time to be up there and just be looking at flowers and swimming in lakes. And so I've just been trying to do that and writing some history articles and staying out of trouble.
Murat, I know you've sent Mark Stern and I a couple of your articles. I don't know if the rest of the committee got to see those. Murat just writes these phenomenal articles. Has you guys were you able to access those? Did we send those out?
I just sent you a couple on beaver.
Yeah.
Beaver things that were happening. The Nugget has a paywall. Those were some that I could send out. The Nugget has a paywall on the history articles, and I've been doing a lot of those, but I can't really send them out.
Yeah.
But yeah, you feel free to share those beaver articles if you think they'd be interesting for anyone. But yeah, there's just a lot of energy around beavers in Central Oregon right now, as in everywhere.
I see that. So those were great articles, Murat. I really
Thank you.
I'll try to get those out to everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
Mark Labhart, how are you?
I'm good, Carl. Murat does history articles too. I think I've blown some smoke for her before, but I'll blow it again. So she's quite a journalist, I would say. So, yeah, great articles. And then, so one of these days, Carl, Liza Jane's a guide. She's a fishing guide on the Wallowa River. So next time you go up there, you're going to have to get with her and go fishing on the Wallowa.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and then hopefully we'll have that darn Wallowa Lake Dam repaired or remodified, and we'll be able to transport fish up sockeye salmon back into Wallowa Lake and get its historical run going again. So I'm just so excited if we could get that thing going. And we've got a lot of momentum behind it, but there's always seems like some clinkers that slow it down. So
is that so? That's a thing, Mark. Yep. Sockeye back into Wallowa Lake.
Yep. I thought it was going to go for a while there, but now there's some hiccups. So I don't know all the details, but I think there's still a lot of momentum behind getting that dam repaired. And Elijah Jane probably knows more about it than I do, but I think there's some issues that still need to be worked out to get that going so we can get Sockeye back in there. So,
That would be amazing.
yeah. Then the last thing I would offer is I'm kind of depressed, to tell you the truth. I'm an old fire guy, and I've been watching all these fires, and we're well over 1 million acres now. And this last storm that went up through Wallowa County and came just north of Bend here and started some fire. They got a 3,000 acre fire just over by Madras right now, and it's going to town. And there's going to be the winds are picking up here, and so there's going to be some more big fires that are going to happen. I think I was talking to Nick Amayat from Modi FNW, and there's some fires over by Ontario, Baker, and then up in the very northeast corner of Oregon. There's some stuff going up there too. So we're going to get some more big fires going. So it's a lot of conservation habitat that's being destroyed, and it's whether it's wildlife or fisheries. So I'm already kind of looking to the future a little bit, and I want to talk to Debbie and staff about, and maybe even OWEB, about potentially looking to the future of, I think there's going to be some federal and state money that's going to come down as a result of some of these fires for habitat improvement projects, both watershed improvements, sage grouse improvements, because we're burning up a lot of sage grouse habitat, burning up a lot of forest habitat, and hopefully there's going to be some funding that would come down. And maybe since we're the conservation strategy habitat small grant program, I bet there's going to be some small landowners out there and small grant folks that might be interested in getting some money from OCRF, and we could sure lobby the legislature, or I don't know if we can, but we can try with our constituents to lobby the legislature for funding to try to get some money on the ground with some of this rehab that's going to have to happen as a result of this. And we're just in the very peak of fire season right now. So pretty depressed when I see the reports. I look at the reports every morning from the Northwest Coordination Center, and they're just more. There's like 4 no big fires this morning, and they're probably going to put teams on those. So it's not good, but maybe there's some good that'll come out of this in terms of habitat rehabilitation. So,
Mark, I really appreciate your thoughts on that. And it's interestingly, I've been having very similar thoughts myself because of what's happening here on a fire that occurred a couple of years ago, the Bootleg. Bootleg, devastated a huge section of the Wainema National Forest. But there's some really great stuff that's happening. It's almost like a blank slate. And some stream restoration has occurred on a pretty big scale. And they're starting to look at upland restoration. As everyone knows, mule deer populations have plummeted across the state. Well, there's an opportunity to address that with bitter brush planting and various things. And so I've been talking to some folks about that and thinking about the role the OCRF could play. And I think it could be quite big. And we just need to figure out how to channel some of those funding streams through us. So it's a really good idea, Mark, and something we should look at, because in many ways, the Bootleg potentially could come out way better than it was. It was a pretty not great forest before it burnt up. And now things are happening in such a way that you might end up with a much more functional system than what we had before. It may take some time, but with the right moves, it's a whole nother story about what they're doing on the creeks here. In brief, they're blasting through these burnt out creeks that have been for years cut down, just ditches basically. And they're cutting down all the burnt trees and dropping them into the creeks. And already after one season, the creeks have accreted back up to the floodplain.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing outcome. And they've done 30, 40 miles of creeks this way.
Well,
And
all right.
it's already transforming, and vegetation's coming in, the fish are coming back. It's like Liza Jane said, build it and they will come. So there is a big opportunity there, something for us to talk about, and maybe to get with Debbie and Sarah and figure out and strategize a way that we could take that on as one of our focus points. Mark, I really appreciate you bringing that to us. Thank you.
It's on my radar, and Eliza Jane, it's on her radar with OWEB too. So stay tuned.
Yeah, let's talk about that. All right, great. I think I saw Mark Stern is here.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Good to see everybody. Tracking the fires in Eastern Oregon, like everybody else, I guess it's sort of an overwhelming thought to see all of that, along with the smoke and experiencing some of that when we were in Central Oregon. As Moret said, there's not fires there, but there's a lot of smoke, that's for sure. Doing a little bit of private forest accord work, that's moving ahead. They've got a grant cycle coming up kind of parallel to the OCRF one, so still a little bit newer there, so more conversations about how to make it work and what kind of projects are eligible or not. So some effort there, and finding different places to get in the water here up on Mount Hood or down along the Columbia River. So it's been really warm, as everybody's experienced. So by the middle of the day, if you're not inside, you want to be near water.
Absolutely. All right. Let's see, we have Jane. Is Jane here?
Yes,
Hi, Jane.
I'm here. Let's see, since we last met, I got to raft the McKenzie River with the McKenzie River Land Trust, and got to see what's happening at Thin Rock, which I think we helped fund. And they are getting ready to submit another proposal for us. So that was good to see how good that's looking. It's going to be a while before that whole area recovers from all the fire there from a couple of years ago, but they're doing good things. I had an interesting conversation, just we'll drop this and something we can talk about more later, with a person from the conservation community who was talking about beaver projects and why are we funding beaver projects in areas where the trappers can just come in and trap the beavers out once the beavers are attracted by the projects that we're helping put in. So that is nothing we need to discuss right now, but something definitely to think about because people are talking about it. And then just the good news around here, our marten colony, we have 2 sets of gourds, and they are fledging right now. And every night it's a big spectacle of watching the babies that have fledged that day trying to get back into their little gourds at night, and the parents trying to settle the kids down. And we've been inviting friends over just to sit out there in our little lawn chairs and watch the show. So it's been fun.
That's great, Jane. I remember those gourd nests you had out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's something we don't get them here. I would love for them to be established closer here.
Yeah, they're really chatty and sociable and fun to watch. So, and pretty tame. You can get pretty close to them.
Great. Well, thanks, Jane. Jim Havant, how are you doing? You there, Jim?
I am there. I just forget to unmute my mic. Fire is the name of the game here. We've got 100,000 plus acre fires to the north, south, east, and west. And they get control of one and then another one blows up. At some point, they're going to run out of resources, or the resources are going to get awfully tired, because I feel for these fire crews at this point. They've been rotating on and off, and I look at the number of fires that are being staffed by at project fire level, and it just doesn't add up. There is a new fire south of Jordan Valley this morning that and went to 2,000 acres, I think, and it's not even staffed. And I don't know that it will be. I mean, it's low on the priority list in terms of people and infrastructure, but it's I won't say it's scary. I think it's just a new paradigm, and I think that we're just going to have to get used to this. These fires are doing things that people have never seen or seen once in their life, and every single fire has extreme fire behavior anymore, particularly with the weather that we've had. I did finish a really interesting book regarding fire that if you haven't read, you should. It's Fire Weather, and this is the story of Fort McMurray in 2016, and it's Arctic fire with black spruce, but it destroyed a town of 100,000. They evacuated 88,000 people from Fort McMurray, and it completely destroyed the town. The houses became the fuel, and amazingly enough, with the evacuation, not a single person died. But the reason that happened is that this fire was so extreme that nobody doubted that they could possibly stay and survive. So everybody evacuated, and the town was just destroyed. They basically used Fort McMurray is right where the tar sands are. And of course, the tar sands are the big evil in terms of climate change and carbon emissions. But they do have big equipment, and they just brought in these D11 cats and just destroyed these subdivisions before they burned. They just put them down because that was the only thing they could do to stop the fuel. Anyway, it's an amazing story that somehow I missed in 2016 when this thing occurred. But I do think that we're going to have to accept that fire is just going to be a different animal than it ever was before in all of the West, but particularly in east side forests and in these dry forests that I live in, and then also in the desert. I just got back I took a fire pump and some fire hose and did a drill down at our place in the Oahe, because I don't think that I would ever have a whole lot of help saving that place. And it is sobering when you see what it takes to really make a place where it won't burn. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of thought. But anyway, that's kind of been my life for about the last month after these fires started, is just thinking about this and trying to sort of resolve in their mind. I mean, you get on Facebook and everything is about praying for all of this and that. Well, we're just going to have to accept it. And we're going to have to recognize that this is going to happen pretty much every summer. We might have a brief summer or two, but it's going to be a different deal. And I think I'm coming to that conclusion that nothing's going to be the same. It's just not, because the heat we're experiencing, we never get 100-degree days here in John Day, and we've had like 15 in a row. It hasn't been below 65 at night, and usually we're like in the upper 40s. I don't know. It's just like Central California moved north this summer, and I think it's gonna be that way. Anyway, that's enough. That's what I've been thinking about.
Jim, that's a lot to think about. Again, we have our own personal interests in this, but as a committee, it's clear from this conversation that there may be a role for us to play moving forward. So we got to be thinking about it. So I'll be interested to hear from Kelly Timchak over where it's actually got some moisture on the coast. I hope they have moisture.
Me too. Does Mark want to speak first? He had his hand up. I don't know if he had a follow-up comment to Jim's before I go.
Just a follow-up. Thanks, Kelly. For those of you who are interested, if you Google Northwest Coordination Center, every morning about 7:30, they have what they call the morning briefing. So if you just scroll, when you get to that website, just go down to morning briefing, and it'll give you a briefing of all the fires in Oregon and Washington. every morning about 7:30. And it tells you what their status is, how big they are, how many acres they burned the day before, what their control is, and any fire that you're interested in. So it's Northwest Coordination Center, Portland, Oregon. Go to morning briefing.
A very depressing way to start your morning.
I know. I will say we also are suffering. We definitely have, pretty low RHs over here, and we are also in extreme danger, but I am the fire danger level. But I am really happy to report that we are having an off year so far. They have already said, though, that this is looking like a terrible August, much like the rest of the state. But fortunately, we had ours last year. The Flat Fire and the Anvil Fire were pretty strong over here in Curry County. So I'm really happy to have the year off, if you will, for now. But we're doing a lot of really cool work right now in those fire footprints for work. We're doing a lot of early detection, rapid response work for invasive weeds in the fire footprints. So that's been really fascinating work. I'm sure we'll see more over the next couple of years. It's light right now, but I'm the same as you guys. I've been staying wet. I've just been trying to get in the creeks with my kids, and we had a big 7th birthday party last weekend and camped up at Quasatna Campground, and it wasn't smoky this year, so that was great. And did a lot of swimming, and we recently introduced our girls to watching the Brooks Falls live feed from Alaska of the brown bears. Oh my gosh, they are just, it's hilarious. They are so playful, and it's funny watching them knock each other off and trying to catch the salmon. And so that has been a Jane's TV comment reminded me of like her sitting there watching the Martin's like TV. So yeah, we've been watching some bears, which has been really fun too. So hopefully we can take them there in person someday, and I'll be looking forward to doing that. But it's really nice to see all y'all, and looking forward to a good meeting today.
Thank you, Kelly. So Reva, how are you?
I'm good. I'm glad Liza Jane is here today because I was also in the Wallowas last weekend. And unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to come visit you, Liza Jane, because I was carpooling, but I did think about you and I looked up Six Ranch on my way there. And I actually had a Six Ranch burger and it
Oh,
was
good,
amazing. Yes, very well done.
good, good.
Yeah, and we spent some time in Joseph. It was beautiful.
Oh.
Very beautiful part of the state. Loved it.
Well, next time stop in.
I'll definitely try. Yeah, I think I'll be back. It's a beautiful, beautiful area.
Yeah.
I see also that we have Sarah here is joining us. So Sarah, are you with us?
Good afternoon, Carl and committee. I am here.
Hey, I want to hear about Portugal.
Yeah, I know. I wish I had a few, maybe I'll try and do it while we're meeting, but I wish I had a few photos teed up because Portugal is an incredibly photogenic place. And just a little over 2 weeks of travel with our kids who are 11 and 14, first time in Europe for all of us, and just really amazing to experience the Portuguese culture and the vibrancy of like the people and the cities, and lots of time on the coast, and it was just really special, really amazing, and I feel really fortunate that we had the opportunity to do that. I also feel like everyone's going to Portugal right now. I don't know if the collective subconscious just decided that Portugal is the new destination, but I could feel that we were a little bit a part of a tidal wave of tourism hitting that what has otherwise, I think, been somewhat of a sleepy, undiscovered country. So I anticipate it's about to change a lot for them.
Well, it sounds like you had a great time. I'm glad you got to experience that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And it's good to be back and see you all. Excited to listen into today's meeting. Thanks.
Oh, great. Well, thanks. I'm glad you're able to join us, Sarah. Okay, did I get everybody? I think I did. So I guess So who's not here? I guess Sristi not here. Okay. All right. So Reva, you want to recognize the folks in the audience?
Yeah, definitely. I see that we have Mike Toady from Oregon Hunters Association and such a regular joiner. Thanks for joining, Mike. And we also have James Frazier, another very regular attendee of our meetings from, I believe, Trout Unlimited. I hope I'm not wrong with that. Thanks for joining, James. And I see also Teresa Padilla. I'm not sure of the organization association, but thank you for joining. And that's all I'm seeing. I hope I'm not missing somebody. Let me just double check. I think that's
We had
who
some
we've got joining today.
Yeah, we had some comments about our public comment timing, and so we moved that up. So you guys,
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have an opportunity, you'll have an opportunity earlier on to speak, because we really value you being here and want to hear what you have to say. All right. So with that, I guess we can move on to the minutes.
Yeah, and I'll just add that our public comment today was scheduled for 1:45, but I think it's going to be running about 5 minutes late. So if you do have public comment, it's probably going to be around 1:50 today, if you'd like to provide comment. So I'll just go ahead and share real quick. And we can go into the minutes.
Is anyone willing to make a motion?
I
will.
moved to.
And we all.
Ta-da!
I'm out.
Who wants to go? You're out. Okay, I'll go and someone else can second. I move to approve the July 2nd, 2024 meeting minutes with the continued authority to correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? All right, minutes have passed. I always like the fact we get something done so early in the meeting. We got another thing done. Okay, so Reva, I can't find my agenda, which I had up. Are we going into the presentation right now?
We sure are. We have Kelsey Smith going to be presenting today on her project. And yeah, I think if she's ready, she can go ahead and take it away and tell us about her monitoring chum salmon returns to the lower Columbia River with eDNA project.
Hi, everyone. As Reva mentioned, my name is Kelsey Smith. I'm here with ODFW, and I am the project leader for the chum salmon reintroduction project. And so I will just share my screen here and we can get going. So here's the trick. If you guys missed it before, if you go up here to display settings and then click swap, it'll switch it. So I was sharing that I just learned that. And so we all need the technology help every now and then, I feel like. Anyway, yeah, so this is a project that you guys have funded, or for me. We've been working the last 2 years in the lower Columbia River to monitor chum salmon with environmental DNA. And here's a list of just some of the partners on the project. And I hope to continue it and grow it to include even more folks in the future. So if you don't know, chum salmon are also known as dog salmon or calico salmon, or sometimes they're called keta. And this is what they look like. Not everyone has seen them, so I always like to start a presentation like this with a picture. When they come back in the fall to spawn, they're this olive green color, and they have these reddish purpley stripes. They also have really prominent teeth, kind of like dogs, and that's how they get their common name as well. They're also our second largest salmon here in the Pacific Northwest. Only Chinook are bigger. And so just to give you guys an overview of some of their life history, this is the range of chum salmon in the northern Pacific Ocean, and it is one of the biggest, if not the biggest. And so all the green areas are where they currently spawn, and you can see that that spans from here in the US and Canada over to Japan and Korea and Russia, on the opposite side of the ocean there. But of course, today I'm going to talk about chum salmon in the lower Columbia River. And so adults come back to the lower Columbia River here in between Oregon and Washington every November. They really only come back in the month of November. So it's a really short time frame. But that's when they come back to these freshwater tributaries to spawn. They lay their eggs at that time, and the eggs incubate in these streams over the winter time. And then in the spring, starting about late February, early March, the fry start to outmigrate towards the Columbia River estuary and eventually into the ocean. And so unlike other salmon species that we have here in the state, these chum salmon fry outmigrate really quickly from these streams. Unlike, steelhead or chinook that spend months or even years in these freshwater systems, chum spend a matter of weeks. And so it's really a unique life history strategy that they have to get out to the ocean really quick. And so they spend anywhere from 3 to 5 years in the ocean developing into adults. But of course, we know that they don't sit right offshore like this. Chum salmon migrate back up to the Bering Sea, and they actually mix in together with all the other chum salmon from all the other countries before they head back to the Columbia River to spawn. When we think about chum spawning habitat, the two main things I want you to remember are low and cold. So they like to spawn in areas low in the watershed. They like low gradient streams. They like low levels of sediment. Low barriers are really preferred. And they like to occupy these areas that have cold water seeps or springs. So in our little diagram here of a watershed, we might expect to find chum salmon spawning in the areas highlighted here. And I just want to mention one more thing about barriers. They often come up with when we think about salmon migration, but chum are a little bit different here too. They are not known as jumpers. They don't try to get over barriers as much as the other species do. And so even somewhat minor barriers can inhibit their migration. And so I always like to show this photo of something kind of silly, but to represent that they don't really, they're kind of lazy, you guys. They don't like to jump over things that are in the way. And so if something is there, it can potentially stop them. And so when we look around at a lot of the tributaries here in Oregon connected to the lower Columbia River, a lot of them have really great habitat for chum. This is a picture of the Clackamas, and you can see, it's a really beautiful spot, right? Like there's low gradient. You can see that nice gravel bar in the lower right. And we have a lot of evidence that chum were in the lower Columbia River historically. I've been digging into some old archives recently, and this is one from the Oregon City Enterprise from 1895 that talks about tribal members catching dog salmon in the upper Clackamas. And of course, we know that places like Celilo Falls were natural barriers for chum on the Columbia itself, but they were often caught there as well. And we know that chum salmon were really popular for canning in all of our canneries along the coast. And so we have all of this evidence, but really, some of this stuff is hundreds of years old at this point. And so most of the people that I talked to today haven't seen a chum salmon in the lower Columbia River or its tributaries, at least not consistently or not recently. And so now I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit more about what happened to these populations here in our neck of the woods. First, I have to talk about harvest in the lower Columbia River. And so this is a graph from Johnson et al. 1997 of all of our commercial landings data of chum in the Columbia going back to the late 1800s. But we also have more of that anecdotal evidence to tell us that chum fishing and harvest was really popular during this time. So here is another article from the Oregonian from February of 1910. And it's kind of hard to read, but it basically is talking about the total amount of chum salmon that was caught in that year between both Washington and Oregon from the river. And chum weighed in at 1.6 million pounds in just that year. And so that corresponds to about this location on the graph. So as you can see, that's not even the maximum number that used to be harvested back then. We estimate that over 1 million fish returned in about 1928, so almost 100 years ago. You also may notice from this graph that things decline pretty rapidly by the 1940s and 1950s. And we have more evidence of that as well, not only scientifically, but anecdotally as well. More information from the Oregonian in November of 1940 says that chum salmon are steadily dwindling. 13 years later, they say that the late fall chum salmon run is scanty. And so you can see how these populations have really been targeted over the last 50 years in this case, to the point where they're basically diminishing rapidly. But we have even more information in the period after this decline. And so this is another graph of the commercial and safe area harvest of chum in the Lower Columbia in the 1970s and 1980s. And the red line is harvest rate in this particular case. But the main thing I want to point out is that in the first graph, we were talking about thousands of pounds of salmon, chum salmon. And in the second graph, we're talking about numbers of individual chum salmon being caught. And so you can see that, you know, the drastic decline even further, so that by, you know, the mid 90s, there was basically no chum salmon left in the river. Also, what's going on during this time is that we've got a lot of habitat loss. And so this is a map of the pre-developmental land use within the historical distribution of chum salmon. And as you can imagine, before white settlers came onto the landscape, a lot of the area was forested or grasslands. There are lots of marshes and tidal areas all along the river. But this is what it looks like today. And so a lot of that forested land has been turned into agricultural land, which is in orange, either low density or high density urban development, which is the darker gray area there. The city of Portland stands out in particular. Or a lot of these forests were cut down and then replanted into late successional forests. And so when we have all of these land use changes around our rivers and streams, it increases pollution and decreases water quality. It means that there's lots of more fine sediment in these systems. It increases temperature, and in some cases it can increase parasites or other diseases that are detrimental to our fish populations. I also have to talk about the altered hydrology in the Lower Columbia. This is a hydrograph of the amount of water that was released in the river before Bonneville Dam was constructed. That's the black line. And then after Bonneville Dam was constructed, which is the gray line. And as you can see, there's a pretty big difference in the amount of water that flows out of the Columbia these days. So historically, over 285 million gallons would flow out of the Columbia every single minute. And that's a really big number that sometimes I can't comprehend. And so I have liked to think about it in terms of football fields full of water. And so if we think about the Seattle Seahawks Stadium, Lumen Field, this is not one, not two, but 2.5 stadiums full of water every single minute that is moving out of the Columbia River before the dam was put into place. After the dam was put in place, we're talking about 158 million gallons per minute, or about one stadium full of water. So you can see that the amount of water moving out of the system has been controlled for a while now, for a lot of really good reasons, right? Power generation, protecting areas from flooding and things like that. But it also has an impact on our habitats for fish. It affects how they migrate, both the adults moving into the system and the fry leaving the system. It sounds pretty simple, but fish need water, right? And if there isn't as much water flowing out of the river, then fish literally have less places, fewer places to live. And it also reduces habitat quality. If you think about the amount of water moving out of the system and how much it's flushing the system, all of that fine sediment and debris and things like that, you can think about how the water quality might change with that flow change as well. And so when you have all of these threats put together, the overharvest, the poor or lost spawning habitat, and a bunch of other impacts that I haven't even had time to talk about yet today, that kind of exacerbates these negative feedback cycles. And so when all of that happens, we have fewer adults, which means we have limited spawning, which means we have fewer eggs, which means there are fewer fry or smolts, which then means that there are fewer adults, on and on and on. And so because of this, 90% of the historical chum salmon populations in Oregon are gone. As a result, chum salmon were listed as threatened on the Endangered Species Act in 1999. Here in Oregon, we have 8 recovery populations. And because of where the Columbia River sits between these 2 states, and because this is a federally listed species, it's a pretty collaborative recovery effort that happens in our area. And so at this point, people usually ask me, like, Kelsey, well, why should we even try to recover chum salmon? Like, what's the point? And for me, there's kind of 4 things that I think about here. The first is that we have a legal obligation to try and recover this species because they're listed. And so that's kind of the on paper reason why we should do it. As a scientist, I often think of the ecological importance that chum salmon play in our systems. They're a keystone species in our lower watershed because they provide a lot of nutrients and they do a lot of gravel cleaning in those areas where other fish don't. They also have a lot of economic value. I kind of alluded to their commercial fishery value historically, but also recreationally. A lot of people used to catch them here in the lower Columbia. And in fact, now when I talk to people about chum, they always tell me about their great fishing stories in Alaska, where they went up there for weeks and spent a lot of time in the Alaskan economy, spending money up there to go on their fishing trip for chum there. And so I also just think about how cool it would be if people traveled here to Oregon to witness our amazing chum returns in the fall and how beneficial that would be for our state. And then the last reason, they do have this cultural and intrinsic value too. The word chum comes from the Chinook language. So if we lost this species, we'd literally be losing a piece of language, which is pretty devastating to think about. They're also really important to our tribes in a lot of different ceremonies. And of course, I'm biased, but I think they're the prettiest salmon. And certainly that has value too. So with all of this listing and need for recovery, ODFW established the program to recover Oregon chum salmon in 2010 under 4 organizing principles. First, we work to restore habitat in the area for chum. We also maintain a conservation broodstock out at Big Creek Hatchery. It's the only hatchery in the state of Oregon that produces chum salmon. We also monitor a lot of our recovery efforts, and then we try to identify and address any limiting factors that might be preventing their recovery in Oregon. And so if we go back to these 8 recovery populations, we've been doing a lot of introduction work here in the coastal populations in blue, which I won't have time to talk to you about today. And then we partner a lot with WDFW for the gorge populations to monitor those. What I want to get into next is what the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund has helped fund, which is some baseline monitoring in these cascade populations, which are green. And because chum are really rare in these systems, our main question we wanted to answer here is, are any chum straying into or recolonizing these areas? And so it can be tough to monitor a species that you can barely find, right? And so how do you do that? The first thing you do is you get a bunch of people on your team and you solicit help from the community, because you can't do it alone. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that you use technology. And this is where environmental DNA comes in, or eDNA. And if you haven't heard about it yet, it's sort of a more popular technique for monitoring, especially fish here in the last 10 years or so. And it's used to identify DNA present in water samples. And so when fish are out there swimming in the water, they're shedding their DNA all the time from their skin, from their waste products, when they spawn, as their bodies decompose. And so if we take a water sample and the fish is present, we'll be able to detect the DNA up to 1 kilometer downstream of where the fish was for over a 2-week period. And so this is really cool because we can detect if the fish was there or not without even having seen it. So this can be useful for guiding habitat restoration projects, for us reintroduction efforts, and determining what other surveys we need to do. And so the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund has helped us do this for chum salmon in these 3 populations. And so just really briefly, we go out onto the landscape and select chummy sites based on some of those habitat features I talked about earlier. We use pumps to filter the water. It takes about 15 minutes to filter 5 liters. And so what we wanted to do was sample during the peak return in the fall, the peak outmigration in the spring, and then 2 weeks after each of those time periods to make sure that we were capturing the presence of fish for as long of a period as we could. Then we send filters off to the National Genomics Center for analysis, and we usually get results within 4 to 6 weeks. We've done this for all of 2023, and by the end of 2024, we will have done it this whole year too. So moving into these 3 recovery populations here, these are the locations that we have sampled in the Scappoose Creek in the fall. And then the blue dots are where we've sampled in the spring. And like I said, we sample twice each season to really make sure that we get all of those, any presence of chum there possible. And this sampling was done by the Columbia Soil and Water Conservation District and their volunteers. Moving into the Clackamas, these are, again, the places that we've sampled in the fall, and then the spring in the blue dots there. I've helped sample some of these areas, but a lot of them have been done by the Clackamas River Basin Council, as well as the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council. And then lastly, in the Sandy River, these are the places that we have sampled in the fall. And again, these are the places we have sampled in the spring. And this sampling has been done exclusively by the East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. Outside of this, we wanted to get the community and schools even more involved in chum and eDNA in general. And so we have bought sampling kits from a company called Jonah Ventures. And these are kind of kid-friendly, or I like to call them youth eDNA kits. They're a little bit smaller. They come with a syringe like this. And Jonah Ventures has developed a really easy way to explain eDNA to like middle, high school level kids. And so we've been using them as an education and outreach tool, not necessarily expecting them to pick up any chum, but really great to spread our sampling effort and get the community talking about chum and eDNA a little bit a little bit more. And so we were able to do this in the fall of 2023 and the entire year this year. And again, just trying to get the community involved a little bit more and more locations sampled. So if we look at some of the results of this, of our efforts, if we start in Scappoose Creek, zooming in a little bit more so that we can get a better picture. This is South Scappoose Creek, and we had one of our Gen Ventures kits was sampled out here, and the kids went out basically in their backyard and did one of these kits, and we didn't find it. They didn't find any chum there, but they did find coho, beaver, and a lot of dog DNA there. And so this we were able to turn into a little bit more of an eDNA explanation, you know, a hands-on science activity that, again, wasn't necessarily chum related, but really cool for these kids to see that, like, oh, I just took a water sample and there's all of these different creatures living right in my backyard, including our own dog, maybe. So that's a really cool result that we've had. If we move into the Clackamas River, again, zooming in to around Oregon City area, even further into the area around Carver. This story is really cool. I got an email from an angler last fall, and he said, Kelsey, I caught a chum on the Clackamas River. And I was like, no, you didn't. We haven't seen chum in the Clackamas in a very long time. Except he sent me this picture, and this is obviously a chum salmon. And this turned out to be the first catch of a chum salmon in the Clackamas in about 40 years. So that on its own was really awesome. But then this was right before our sampling was going to occur. And a couple weeks later, I went out with a partner to do our eDNA sampling, and we got a positive detection. And so we think that fish swam about 13 kilometers up past our sampling point, died or spawned or was, you know, swimming around up there above our sampling area. And so we were able to detect it. And so this was a really cool example of, number one, not only how eDNA can work to detect chum in a system like this, but also our outreach and education efforts. You know, like this angler knew to contact me to tell me because he knew that we were doing this project in the Clackamas River. And so it just goes to show that you need both things in order to make progress on something, you know, that's really hard to do, like monitoring this really rare species. So that one's really cool. But, and not to end it on a sad note, we haven't had any positive detections of chum in the Sandy yet. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. The first thing is that we know the method works, right? I just showed you an example in the Clackamas of how it does work. We've also had good detections in the Clatskanie River where we're doing a lot of reintroduction. The other thing is that no detections is still good information for us. It tells us that chum are still really rare in these systems and that we don't need to send out, you know, big crews of people to do more extensive surveys because they probably won't find any chum anyway. It also tells us that chum may not be able to recolonize on their own. If only a few or none are straying into these systems, it means that they're probably never going to reestablish themselves, you know, in significant numbers by themselves. We might have to actually do more on the ground reintroduction in these systems if we want to see sustainable chum populations. And the last thing about eDNA that's really cool is that the samples can be processed for other species. So if there is another group that is interested in lamprey, for example, or mussels or other invasive species, they can rerun the samples that I've collected or that this group has collected for these species. So even though we didn't get any positive chum detections, maybe somebody down the road will get a positive lamprey detection, for example. So I alluded to the education and outreach portion of this project as well. And so we kind of had two goals here for education and outreach. The first was to just get people talking about chum again. A lot of people don't know that chum are in the lower Columbia River. They think about the Oregon coast, they think about Alaska, but they always forget about the underdog here in the lower Columbia. So we wanted to kind of drum up that interest again. The second thing we wanted to do was create things that would last or be reusable and have a really consistent message. Chum are really important to the lower portions of our watershed. Everyone needs one, including us. And so that was the kind of message that we were looking to create here. We created an outreach kit that is able to be transported to different in-person events or used in online education like this. So we have a couple of different things that we include in that kit. We have a chum focused page, which looks like this, which is just talking about chum salmon identification and then the life cycle here in Oregon, which is what I shared with you earlier. We also have a couple eDNA focused pieces, and this just talks about how eDNA works and how DNA is present in the water and how you can collect it and what it can tell us. And then a little bit more behind the scenes of the science of how you can detect one species or a bunch of species or even individual fish. And then lastly, there's a bit about what we're doing here in Oregon as far as research and reintroduction and monitoring, and then how you can help. Have you ever seen a chum spawning in Oregon? Do you remember catching them a long time ago? There's a way to contribute your story to this program or to this process to help us monitor or recover this species. We've also done a lot of social media campaigns. One I'll talk about was with the Clackamas River Basin Council, where they did a chum salmon takeover last fall. And so I created a few different things that they could use on social media. And so this one in particular was talking about chum salmon spawning habitat. Just what I mentioned to you before about thinking low and cold and the different threats to those low and cold things, and then how you can help in each of those ways. And then lastly, we've done a lot of events in person and online. I've spoken at a lot of Watershed Council board meetings. We've done a few things for the Coastal Conservation Association. I've done a lot of talks at community colleges and even a local middle school. And maybe like most widespread, I was interviewed for OPB on their Think Out Loud program earlier this year, and I was able to talk about eDNA there and the plight of chum. And so with all of this put together, just over the period, the funding period, we've done over 12 events and literally thousands reached with all of this information. And so without the funding support from you guys, we couldn't have done all of this. So it's really been great. So with the remaining funds, I've still got a little bit more to spend. Like I said, we have that final fall sampling event this fall. I'd like to buy some more of those youth eDNA kits to spread throughout the land. They last a long time, and so kids and schools and teachers can use them well into the future. There's a few more outreach materials that I think would be good to have around our communities and some more volunteer gear to buy. But this is really just the beginning of this project, in my view. This funding has really allowed us to establish a baseline and a foundation for continuing this monitoring. So with the money, we were able to buy those pumps, which are really expensive. I was able to get 3 of them. And so not only are we sampling for chum eDNA, but actually this week I'm loaning them to the Forest Service to detect eDNA for bull trout in the upper Clackamas. They heard about our project, heard I had pumps. I'm not using them right now, so why not let them borrow them for another really great conservation goal that we have. It's also provided an opportunity for kids to connect with science and get involved in a hands-on way, which is really important for, the future of all our environmental problems. And so that's been a really important thing to do too. And then lastly, I think, or second to last, we've been able to share more with the community about chum and that they exist in our watersheds and what the state is doing to help bring them back. And like I said, this is really great baseline information for us to determine where or when or how we need to start reintroduction efforts in some of these other populations. So that's been really great. Second to last slide here. Chum salmon were once really common in the lower Columbia River, but harvest and habitat loss are the main reasons that they declined over the last 100 years or so. Today, they're really rare in many of the recovery populations that we have, but ODFW and our partners are monitoring chum with eDNA and building this community awareness so that we can guide some of these habitat restoration projects that are happening, document any natural recolonization if it's occurring, and then direct any future reintroduction efforts. There's lots of people to thank. These are some of our volunteers and other folks from WDFW and ODFW and our funding sources as well, including you guys. With that, I will take any questions. I've also got my email up here on the screen. And so if you think of something later that you want to ask, or if you want me to speak at another event, just let me know. I love doing these. And so I'm really happy to share any information and answer any questions you have. So thank you.
Kelsey, thank you for a great presentation. Really, really well done, well put together, very clear direction that you're going, and we sure hope you're successful. I was not very aware of the chum situation in Oregon, and that was very helpful to me. Does anyone have any specific questions for Kelsey? Mark Labhart?
Yeah, just a quick one, Kelsey. Do we know our chum, when they come out of the Columbia, it looks like they're turning north and heading west. And are they targeted by any commercial fleets?
So not here in Oregon. There is a commercial fishery for them up in Alaska. And like I said, there are a lot of recreational anglers that go up there to catch chum specifically. They're really fun to fight, is what I hear. So here locally, no, there's not a commercial fishery for them in our state. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think the closest one is in Willapa Bay. For the adults there, but
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kelsey, what's the healthiest chum population that you're aware of? Which tributary or river?
So on the Oregon side, the biggest and probably most consistent return comes to Big Creek, just outside of Astoria. And that's where our hatchery is, Big Creek Hatchery, and that's where we have our conservation broodstock. We had just about 800 come back last year. In 2021, we had over 2,300, which is pretty substantial for us. That's our record since we've been keeping track. Outside of that, on the Oregon side, it's pretty scanty. Washington is a lot better. They've been doing a little bit more recovery and reintroduction work for a little bit longer than we have in Oregon. So their populations are a little bit bigger.
Thank you. Jim Hammett?
Yes, Kelsey, that was a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. One question I'm just curious about, and it probably doesn't have anything to do with the lower Columbia population, but will a chum climb a fish ladder?
They will. And in fact, they do pass over Bonneville Dam for sure. Last year, I think, was a pretty high year for them. passing Bonneville. They also, in the last 4 or 5 years, have been going over Willamette Falls as well. I get, a couple emails every now and then about that. And so they will. It's those other kind of smaller but substantial barriers that they have a problem with, right? So like poorly built or constructed culverts or bridges, a really, really big log jam and low water, that's not really going to work for them either. Beaver dams in some cases can be a problem too. Not always, depends on the flow, depends on the situation, but those kinds of things that are kind of forgotten about, that are lower in the watershed, can be a problem for Chum.
Thanks.
Mark Stern.
Yeah, Kelsey, really nice presentation, really insightful, easy to follow, clear, and just really, you made your points really well. So that was nice. One thought, I'm sure you're familiar with Oregon Field Guide, but it seems like your story there would be just a great story for Oregon Field Guide to do, and an opportunity to highlight OCRF and the other people involved as well. So I'd certainly encourage you to reach out to that, or maybe we can plant that seed somewhere as well. But nicely done.
That's a great idea. Thank you. Bill Monroe covered it pretty early on when it happened. And so it got a little bit of coverage that way. But I think it's such a cool story. It really shows the crossroads of science and community work, and how you need both in these kind of situations. So yeah, that's a great idea.
Kelly Timchak.
Well, without repeating too much of what Mark said, I also just wanted to share my appreciation of your presentation and the style to kind of give, it some charisma and show its charismatic sort of abilities, along with its place in the social and economic scene. And then also just wanted to make note, like back in 2005, when I was here working at ODFW, I found a chum salmon in Hunter Creek, which was totally weird and very odd. But I remember pulling the teeth out, and I kept those, and I made earrings out of them because everybody's like,
gosh,
I'm like, these are salmon teeth, which just blows people away. But they're amazing. And just appreciate your eDNA work. We've done a whole bunch of stuff with Pacific Lamprey here recently on the South Coast with ODFW and also with the U.S. Forest Service. So that's been a really cool collaboration. I love seeing when all these groups get together and do a lot of work. So thank you for sharing the partners and everything you guys are doing as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. Those earrings sound really awesome too. That's so cool.
Well, Kelsey, thank you very much for the presentation. Best of luck with this really important project, and look forward to hearing about future successes.
Yes, thank you guys for having me and all of your attention and good questions and everything. Like I said, feel free to reach out if you think of anything else. So
Great. Thank you
Thanks.
very much. I will say, Kelly Timchak, it's hard for you to go up more in my estimation than you already are. But the fact you made a necklace out of salmon teeth, even better. All right. Well, great. Thank you for a great presentation, and appreciate everyone watching that. So is it time for public comment, Reva?
It sure is. Yeah.
So why did anybody indicate they wanted to say anything?
Not as of yet. But if there is anyone who would like to provide public comment, now would be the time to do so, and please go ahead.
All right. Well, we do appreciate the folks that come and attend the meetings, and thanks. James texted nothing from him. Again, we really appreciate your attending these meetings. Very important to us. Okay, well, great. So again, I had my schedule up, but I've managed to lose it. So what's on the next on the agenda?
The next thing on the agenda would be for us to go over the strategic plan together as a group. But I'm wondering, Carl, if you would want us to take a break before we get into that?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good idea. Let's just take a short break. It's 2:16. Let's be back at 2:25. That should give everybody a chance to get a drink or something. And so we'll see you at 2:25. Great. Thanks. Hey, Jim. Hey, I was just curious with you over on the Hawaii. I've never laid eyes on the Hawaii, much less rafted it. And I was thinking I have a cataract, and I was thinking about next year rafting it. Have you rafted the Hawaii? You're on mute. Jim,
I
you're
have
on
not. Yeah, I raft very little. I know people that have. There's two different. I mean, there's very extreme rafting if you go from Three Forks down to Rome, and then most people go from Rome down to Lake Oahe, and I think that's a reasonable raft. But it is a short period of time, and you have to really watch the water levels. This year was great. I mean, the water levels stayed up well on into June, and it's a great trip from what I understand. The upper one, which has been done some, it's got a lot of class 4 and 5 water in it. It's kind of kayak.
Yeah, I'd just like to get over and see that. I've just heard a lot about it, just never I even eyeballed it. So
Well, it's hard to get there, particularly from the east. I mean, you can drive down to Three Forks fairly easily, turn it on a gravel road, and that's where most 99% of the people see the Oahe. But coming in from the east side, it's an excursion. I mean, it's an excursion on an ATV or 4-wheel drive, and it's scary because there's no cell phone coverage. And I think that's one of the attractions is that scariness aspect.
yeah, it sounds like a cool area. All right, so looks like it's about time to get going again. I think we got most everybody back. Reva, you want to talk about the strategic plan?
Sure. Yeah. Hopefully everyone can see the slides okay. And yeah, so I wanted to have a chance to go over with you all since we have, hopefully you've had a chance to look at the strategic plan after it's been the new and improved version, and it's got revamped, a little beautified from our ODFW graphic designer. So hopefully many of you have seen it already, but all the content is the same as the version that you all approved at your May 7th meeting. It's just been designed by Aubrey Peranud. And I also wanted to just take a chance to thank the whole committee, just take a beat and thank you again for all the work that you put into it last year and sometime at the beginning of this year, and all the amount, you dedicated a significant amount of your time to crafting this really thoughtful strategic planning process. So I wanted to take a second and say that on the record here, and also thank Sherilyn Abbott, Resources, who led us through this effort. And then also, of course, our graphic designer, Aubrey Peranud, who's made it look really beautiful and visually very appealing. So hope you all like it. And then I wanted to take a chance for us to go through it today because we've worked so hard to craft this plan for 2024 through 2028. But first of all, thanks everyone, and congratulations on this huge milestone for OCRF. It's a big deal, this got done for the program. And so I thought we could look through the execution section together. We could go over that and kind of get an overview of some of the things that you all identified as goals and actions for the strategic plan. So here's the operational excellence section and some of the goals that the group called out were increasing understanding of OCRF's decision-making process with grant applicants, ODFW staff and ODFW commissioners. And then the other high-level goal was to sustain commitment and collaboration of the advisory committee members. So just a few key actions to highlight here for you all. This one at the top here, we are going to be doing a little bit of this later today in our meeting as we have a chance to do some application review. So we can identify actions to better support an easy to follow and inclusive application preparation process. And we have a chance to discuss that later today. And then down here, I'd like to call your attention to this key action here, which is that the committee highlighted, which was making sure we're, having at least one in-person meeting per year. And we did have that in June for committee engagement. We had an in-person meeting convened, and then the program also had their first ever OCRF site visit to 2 project locations, Whitaker Ponds with People of Color Outdoors, and then the Polensky Highway 30 frog crossing site with ODFW. And then the last one here that I've highlighted is regarding committee member term lengths. And that's just something that I wanted to provide an update to you all about, is that I recently met with the executive appointments team at the governor's office to discuss the situation for OCRF, which is that almost all member terms will expire in 2026 at the same time, which isn't good for promoting continuity of the expertise and experience of our current committee. So we've discussed with them how to stagger terms, stagger your term length so that we're not going to be losing all of the committee expertise at the same time. So that's something that's in the works, and I'll be providing more updates on that as well. Okay, and then strategic partnerships. Just some highlights of your key actions to execute over this year. Supporting Oregon Wildlife Foundation's efforts to build strategic partnerships for OCRF, and developing an engagement strategy for coalition partners. And then underneath this broader awareness and understanding is developing a communication strategy with Oregon Wildlife Foundation and opportunities and messaging. And a lot of these are going to be tackled with that communication strategy planning that we are, I'll provide an update in just a few moments. All right, and then
Reva, could you go back real quick?
Yep. Yeah, sure.
So these, I wanted us to kind of go back and review this. I don't want this to be a document that we do and then forget about. But this is a really nice flow chart, and is important at this time because, again, we are confronted as usual with our funding situation, and all of these things are tied into that, like our efforts to improve our strategic partnerships and our coalition. That's going to be critical in us trying to secure a more secure funding situation. And we have had assurance from ODF&W administration that this is a priority for them, and particularly this biennium, this upcoming biennium. So I just wanted everyone to remember that we decided we were going to do this because it's going to be really important as we go forward. We have to be working on this pretty much starting now. I think if we're going to be successful in the upcoming biennium for an attempt at improving our long-term funding situation. So I just wanted to point that out to everyone.
Yeah, thank you. All right, ready to move on to the next broad category. So this is the funding and investment priorities section of the execution section of the plan. And a key action that you all identified was to identify unmet needs per conservation strategy for this year. And then also to create OCRF criteria review process and schedule. So these are some things that, you know, we need to flush out and figure out how we're going to have a plan of attack for this action.
Well, again, great conversations like the one that Mark Labhart instigated in terms of unmet needs. I mean, the whole fire picture is something that is part, it's interesting. So we had that discussion, and that's part of our strategic plan to have more discussions like that. So we appreciate Mark's efforts in bringing that up, and something for us all to think about, because as we are communicating with the legislature, as we're trying to devise a strategy for funding, those kinds of things are really valuable. If we can articulate our role that we could play in those kinds of things, it could really go a long ways in helping us secure funding. So it's nice to see that we're already doing some of these things that we have listed.
Yeah. That is nice to see. Yeah, this document is it's already being used. It's already really helping out the program. And then so I wanted to provide an update on the communication strategy, but also tie it into, as you just saw, it ties into a lot of these key actions that you all identified in the communication strategy under different categories. The broadening the awareness of OCRF and also increasing our partnerships. So the RFP for securing a contract with a communications consultant actually closed on July 24th. That's the one that was released with the help of Tim Gresseth from the Oregon Wildlife Foundation, one of our big partners. And we received 11 proposals. And then the next steps for that is just to review the proposals that were received. And we'll be aiming to select a communications consultant by around mid-August. So that's really great. Things are moving along with this communication strategy. And then that will tie into a few different key areas of the strategic plan that you all identified.
Mark Stern has a question.
Yeah, just a little more on the communication strategy. Can you remind us, do we have a budget range or amount of money that we allocated for this? And then I'm wondering also if you can share the RFP with us, if it's just to see what that scope of work looked like.
Yeah, I think we can. I think now that it's, yeah, I think we definitely can share that out. I just have to make sure that it's okay once it's, you know, there's a lot of rules with how to manage an RFP, but now that it's closed, I think we can share that out with everyone. And then the budget was a range between 30 to around 60K. And we wanted to see what was going to be coming in and how the companies were going to delineate their pricing and in the quotes, and then decide how much we wanted to tackle with that RFP.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Mark Labhart.
This might be a question for Sarah, but the group that's going to be reviewing this for selecting the proposal. I'm sure it's going to be a member from the Wildlife Foundation and the department. Are we going to have any member from OCRF on that group to review the 11 proposals?
Yeah, we're gonna have our chairs,
Okay,
Carl and Mauricio, gonna
Great.
take some of their time to get that done.
good. Thank you.
We were particularly interested in Mauricio's input.
Yeah, because of his experience, he's gonna be really helpful in this selection. All right, any more questions on the communication strategy?
I'll say, is there anybody else that wants to, anyone else interested in helping out with that? I mean, the more input we can get is fine. If anyone particularly has an interest in taking part in that. If you do, just let us know and we'll definitely include you.
Didn't you volunteer Kelly to help you with that before?
I'm not sure. I think it was Mark Labhart that was going to help us. No? Okay. Well, it's open. It's absolutely out there for people to join, if you want to help review those applications.
Well, we might still need to rope in Kelly. We'll see if she has time.
Yeah, if you guys need me, I can probably help out. Didn't know how much of a need there is, but I'm always happy to help.
Great, thanks, Kelly. All right, any other thoughts on the strategic plan and, you know, anything before we move on to a RFP discussion?
Thanks, Reva. Thanks for presenting that. Again, I want to keep that strategic plan in front of us so that we're being true to the time we spent with it and make sure we're actually getting some things done. That was the purpose. So thanks for putting that together, Reva.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we definitely don't want it to just sit on the shelf. It's a great document that we want to keep pulling up and reviewing in our meetings and referring to it as much as we can. So, all right. Well, so I'm going to go ahead and move into shift gears into our fall 2024 RFP that's coming up. And we're just going to start off with an application review. If anyone had a chance to look at our application from our spring RFP and had any thoughts about it, now we have some time set aside to have a discussion on that with the group. It could, if you have thoughts about the grant management system and how that worked, if you've heard from any applicants about how that's been working. I've heard good things. Interested if you all have heard anything and thoughts about the application questions in general and application process.
Hey,
particularly Kelly.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Reva, I know we have a call scheduled. We missed our last call, and it was some questions about the RFP. And I don't know if I was good at describing that before, but it was mostly about like sort of the back end of the RFP and like how things are weighted, how they're judged, purpose of information gathered. So I do have like a whole bunch of questions that I had lined out for our conversation. So I don't know if you want to do that now or if we want to do that in a side conversation and then summarize. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think maybe like if you think there's some high level things to discuss with the group, and then I'm happy to get more into the nitty gritty with you when we have our meeting to talk about it more in detail.
Yeah. Sure. If you want me to go ahead. And some of them, I mean, Mauricio's not here today either, right?
No,
That's
no.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of them I'd like to hear his opinion on it as well. But I was just looking at the proposal you had sent as well, and I guess I'll just jump right into it. But one of them, which we have all discussed in the past, is the measures of equity section. I understand that sometimes, equity may not lend itself to a project. I know there are certain projects, usually sort of research-based or ODFW, or maybe just some other pieces that aren't lending themselves. So I couldn't remember if those questions are sort of rated, or if there's a different way to ask, to be like, is this, does it meet this or not, versus like describe how it does. Because I feel like as a grant writer, and other people too, you do tend to like want to write to something. And so I think it has people bend in ways of which the project doesn't always lend itself. And that being said, I'd like to hear what other people say too. I can hear Mauricio in my head being like, too, if we don't push people, then people might not think outside of the box about how they could include equity. So I'm having this, the little angels and devils on my shoulders here, thinking about how to best move forward with this objective question. So I'd love to hear if anybody else has thoughts on that first.
Any
That's
other
a really
comments?
good.
about
It's a
that?
really good point, Kelly, because I know that we tried to broaden the outdoor equity section for our spring RFP, and it would be good to hear, as you reviewed those sections, how you felt that went, if it broadening that outdoor equity section helped in your review process, or what you all thought about that.
I think what we don't want to have it look like is that, and I think we've tried hard to avoid it, but I'm not sure if we've been successful. And that is that this outdoor equity thing is just sort of tacked on as this thing that, you got to jump through these hoops. And we tried to make it so that it was more integral to what we do. And at the same time, those projects that just, there's really not a way to incorporate that aspect. You don't want to necessarily penalize them. But then Mauricio's point is always a good one, is like, well, how can I do this differently that maybe I could, if I hadn't thought about it, how could I incorporate a outdoor equity piece into it? So you don't want to, necessarily give a complete free pass on it. But it's just hard to thread. I don't want it to look like it's just like, oh, you got to make something up and put it in how you're doing outdoor equity when you're really not. And we certainly have. I've come across a couple of applications that were like that. It was like, whoa, they just made this up, and I don't want to put people in that position where you have to sort of make things up to hit some somewhat arbitrary goalpost.
Right. I just wonder on the, when it does have a score on the back end. So, I mean, I've definitely read applications, and I remember reading some of them too, where it almost just feels like a NA, like it's not applicable. But then if you get a 0, then, you're technically sort of scored less. So anyway, it's something for us to consider about how to do that. I mean, they might score higher in other ways too, but yeah. Anyway, that was just one of my thoughts.
Mark Stern?
I think it is really challenging, and you both described the challenge well. I think one thing I noticed in the last round, we had a lot more applications that came from organizations that were sort of rooted in DEI, that were writing a proposal for an OCRF type project. And for me, it was easier to, in terms of scoring, those types of projects scored better in that category, because I felt like it was a deeper connection, whether it was people of color outdoors, or I can't remember what the other groups were, but there was we had 4 or 5, I think, in the last time that scored well. So those groups, for me anyway, in the equity scoring bucket, did relatively well compared to some of the other ones, and they're scaled from having some meaningful engagement to, unfortunately, some who had a tag on at the very end just because they were trying to think of something to say. So I don't have an answer to it, but I guess the thing that I found encouraging is we had more applications from groups that were sort of based in DEI with their intent to do an OCRF conservation strategy project. So I felt that was a good outcome from where we've been.
Thank you, Mark. Jim Hammett?
This is kind of the first time that I went through that scoring process, and I thought that some of the projects that I rated, it was a real stretch to get that. I mean, it was basically an exercise in creative writing, and perhaps one of the things we could do is use the system itself, and maybe take, if you've got 7 criteria, score only the top 6. I think that there's other things too that aren't a factor in every project, but what we're doing is we're scoring them all, and maybe we can handle this maybe a different way with the system and just score, the top. Take one criteria, or take if you fail to meet one criteria and you've got a really good project, that project should still score high, but it's probably not going to, because the scores are so high relative to all the other projects. We've got a lot of good projects to go. So I don't know if that'd work or not, but it might.
That's an interesting thought. We'd have to go back and look at the application itself and see exactly how, the different areas we're emphasizing. And like you said, let's say you throw out the lowest score of one of your given rank.
Right. And probably some of them shouldn't be thrown out. For example, the relationship to the Oregon Conservation Plan and strategy. I think that there are some that are really important, and maybe the DEI part of this falls into that. But I do think that is one way you could handle this issue.
Jane Hartline?
These are intriguing ideas. It seems like there's more than one path to success, and that maybe the way we have it is kind of okay, because also agree that the fit with the Oregon Conservation Strategy is a really high priority, and the scores reflect that. But maybe there's some projects that aren't quite as tied in with that, but they have a great DEI angle, and so that might help make up for it. But I don't know how we communicate that. I don't know. I think that's difficult to say. It's one of our priorities, but it's not essential that it be in every project. If it doesn't make sense for it to, I don't know.
What I'm taking you to say, Jane, is the system's working pretty good like it is. In that we have, even though some people may end up making stuff up for the DEI part, we all know that it's made up and they don't end up getting a high score, but they may be fantastic for the Oregon Conservation Strategy part, and that just gets reflected in our final numbers. That's kind of what I'm hearing you say, is the system's working fairly well like we have it.
Well, I think it is. I guess I'd want to go back and look and see in that last batch. I always feel like there's some of the very important science and research monitoring kinds of things that are harder to do with DEI that don't score as well because they don't have that. And sometimes the answer to that is, I think the classic one was the proposal where they were going to have elementary school kids go out and look for something in rattlesnake country. And I thought, what? You know, do they get the points because they came up with something that's sort of far-fetched and or is it more important to have you know, paid researchers out or trained adult volunteers in a situation like that? The other thing I always think about is turtles, where, you know, you can get a whole bunch of people out there stomping around to help monitor turtle numbers, but you know, they're not gonna see many turtles because you have to be really quiet and you have to be trained and you have to know what you're looking for. And there just are situations where, you know, throwing lots of people at it that are not as well trained is not going to be the best outcome.
Yeah, let's see, we have a hand up. Liza Jane?
Thank you. I have a question in our RFP. Does it tell the applicant how many points are possible for each section?
Yeah, so the scoring criteria is posted for the applicants to see, and then they can see that, you know, this many points are for the outdoor equity section, this many points for, yeah.
Okay.
Different
Would
sections.
it be possible to be able to describe our priorities and values that we don't attach points to, and the reasons why that's difficult? Exactly this conversation we're having on the application, and then take those point systems off of those, like that diversity, equity, inclusion is valuable to the process, but we don't score that because we recognize it's not always a good fit for each project. And then do we give specific points for ties to the conservation, the Oregon Conservation Strategy?
Yeah, we give a lot of points to that. That one has by far the most.
It's specific to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's already in there. Is there any other things that we kind of value that could be skewing things? I don't remember right offhand.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few of them that we, you know, as becomes part of the scoring.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of all this is the proof is in the pudding. And if we go back and look at the projects that got funded, we didn't fund some very good projects, but that was just because we didn't have the money. I personally was quite happy with how things shook out. I mean, the really good projects, whether they were DEI or straight up research, got funded. So I think it's important to have this conversation, but at the same time, I don't think we want to beat on it too hard, and unless we start really seeing, wait a minute, this is a great project that didn't get funded because it didn't have any DEI. I haven't seen that happen, honestly. I think that we give DEI some points, but it's not a huge high point. It's enough that it might make a difference between two very similar projects. And one will get the go ahead because it has DEI and the other one doesn't. So I value this conversation, and I really love everybody's input and thoughts about it. And we need to keep having this. But I'm not quite sure we have a situation that we need to change a whole lot. I just haven't seen it. I have heartburn like crazy when I finally see the list, and but then I go look at it and goes, oh my God, we really did it. We really got them. I mean, and of course with Jane and her husband, we totally got it. I mean, the ones that I really felt bad about. They ended up funding. But still, that, that I think there weren't any ones way that were down in the list that just really stood out as, oh, we should have picked that one up, as opposed to the other one. So I've been pretty happy with it. I think it's great to have these conversations, but I'm not sure we want to tinker with things too much, unless we start noticing, like in the next round, that something's not quite adding up. Does that sound all right to everybody? I'm seeing.
Yeah,
heads
that's fine with me. And I'll take another look at the scoring criteria too. I don't know if I misplaced that or what, but I'll compare it to I have a couple other questions too that are just kind of back end stuff. And so I'm happy to have that conversation with Reva, and we can bring it back also to the whole group, because I saw there's only 15 minutes for this section, so I don't want to take it over.
Yeah. One of the things I would say going through the application, it seemed like I was flipping through a lot of pages that didn't have a whole lot of stuff that was relevant. And I don't know if it was like more busy work for them to have. It seemed like there's just some extra stuff on there that really wasn't that relevant. And I'm not sure if we can thin that down a bit. Some of that I think has to do with we're using the same process as the Forest Accord. But Reva, and you're thinking about it, and as you're going through it, you might look at that and say, wait a minute, we've asked this question 3 times on 4 different pieces of paper, and try to reduce that to some degree.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Carl. I'll take a look at
it. That's the majority of my questions. After filling out a PFA grant application and doing several OWEB applications, I mean, and OWEB has shortened up several of theirs in the past too, but grantors love asking the same question 4 or 5 different ways, and it is so frustrating as a grant writer, but we know we're doing it. But anyway, if there's ways we can streamline this process for people and for us, now that I'm on the other side, I'm like, holy goodness, why do you want to read an 18-page application? Like, we need information that we need to make decisions.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. There was a lot of paper that didn't play into my decision, and that meant I was trying to find the stuff that did play into it, and kind of got lost in the pages. So just think of that. Just take a look at that as we're going forward.
Okay, I will. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the feedback. And Kelly and I are going to meet, and we'll talk a little bit more about application tomorrow, so we can maybe figure out how we could reduce it a little bit for the next round.
Kelly, your input into this is so important because you're in it, and I really appreciate you taking the time to look at this and go through it, because you're going to have better insight than any of us. And so it's really valuable for you to do that. So thank you very much for doing
it. Yeah, thank you, Kelly. I'm glad I get to snag her for a little bit tomorrow. All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and move on to talk a little bit more about the timeline for the fall RFP. So we talked about this at our last month's meeting, and I listened to your feedback of how we could, try to move it up to the March commission as our goal. Because last month I proposed a timeline that had us going to the April commission. So now we have it opening a little bit earlier, August 30th, just at the end of the month. Closing October 29th, so it would be open for 60 days. And then our technical review period is extended a little bit because I've received feedback from staff that they really could use a little bit more time. They're, pretty strapped as it is. And then we're asking them to review all these projects, proposals. So doing a 5-week technical review period is going to be better than the 4-week one that we had originally And then we have our OCRF Advisory Committee review period for mid-December to mid-January. And then advisory committee recommendations, February 4th. And then going to the commission voting March 14th. And that gives us enough time to get the decision made from the fall RFP, and then for me to get those materials to the ODFW commissioners with enough time to review those ahead of time. And release of funds in June for our fall RFP.
And Reva, if I'm correct, I mean, Mark Stern brought up the timeline last time, and I think this moves everything up a month, right? Pretty
Mhm.
much.
Yep,
And I
exactly.
think that's about as much as we can comfortably do. I mean, the RFP is going to go out at the end of this month. So I
Right.
appreciate you, and that puts a little bit more burden on Reva, and she's got to get some things done quicker. And I think we were able to get it moved up a month, and appreciate her being willing to do that.
Yeah, Kelly.
I just had a quick question, which I don't know if Mark's gonna be in the same vein, but they haven't actually posted that I can see the date of the PFA grant applications, but I didn't know if this was now going to be like overlapping. I'm just thinking about Mark, if he's going to have like 45 applications to review in a short timeline.
It's a really good question. I met with Andy Spurka, the PFA coordinator, and showed him this timeline. And we talked about it because we've got Mark Stern on both committees, and then also we might have some overlapping technical reviewers as well between the two programs. So we determined that it is offset enough that it's not right at the same time, but it's about a month offset from each other. So it should be all right. But yeah, Mark Stern, let me know if you have any concerns with that as well.
No, I'm okay with it. I think it's probably a harder lift for some of the technical reviewers who get doubled up, because PFA in particular has more technical reviewers because they involve Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA fisheries as well. So theirs is a little more complicated to assimilate and coordinate. I think it's okay. The question, I think it's good, and I appreciate you, Reva, working to modify the timeline here. The question I have is, if an applicant hears in the middle of March that their project is funded, can they begin to spend funds at that point that they would subsequently be reimbursed for? Or when can they start sort of?
That's a really good question, and it's something that we've struggled with a little bit, because they can't really start to spend on the project until they get a fully signed contract from ODFW. And so yeah, they're really not supposed to be expending any funds until they get that contract from us. We have talked a little bit about how, with contracts, how we could change that process if an approved grant, approved funding from OCRF is good enough for them to start working on the project. And the answer we got back was that's probably not going to be, currently that's not going to be okay for them to start yet. And we'd have to get that changed, would involve, well, PFA is actually thinking about doing this. So, and you might have heard some of these discussions, but I believe they're trying to maybe modify their OARs so that they could make that happen for in-water work, for timelines, schedules, to make it work a little bit better for applicants.
Yeah,
So-
I can appreciate that it's difficult from the contracting side of the fence, sort of. I think on the other hand, obviously, if you have an applicant here who wants to do a project beginning in the spring, if they know it's approved in the middle of March, then they can, begin to launch their project. But if they're really gonna wait till July or whenever to begin to have a signed contract, then obviously they're gonna lose a field season if it's a spring-based field season. Anyway, so that'd be the reason why.
Yeah.
If there's a way to do that, I think it'd be really helpful to the applicants.
I 100% agree. I mean, we can move up our timeline. We've moved up our timeline, but still they're not going to get funding till June. And I don't know if there's a way to tighten up the contracting process. That's May, June, I guess March, April, May. I mean, that's 2 months of contracting. I guess it just takes that long. But if the PFA is trying to change their OARs, and maybe we should just piggyback on that as well. And so that as soon as the commission votes, then they're good to spend their money. I think that's really helpful for the applicants. So Reva, as that process, if you can kind of track that process that the PFA is doing and see if in fact they are doing that we do the same.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted. We've had some ongoing discussions about it because it would be really nice if we could allow them to start working on it right as it's approved, but we've just kind of got hung up on a few, contracting details there. But I'll keep you posted, let you know what's going on with PFA and if we could piggyback on that as well.
Brett?
I guess my question was for Reva. Do we share the RFP timeline with applicants so they know? I know in the past, at least one person had contacted me about, they didn't understand when the money would be coming. So I think, it's tough that they can't get it earlier, but if they know, that would be helpful.
Yeah, this is posted to our website where they apply. And I'm sure that they would, if they know ahead of time and they can plan for it, it's always better for them to prepare for getting the funds later.
And maybe as part of our communications, if people are chosen, we just sort of reiterate the funds won't be available until X dates, just so they know. There's so much stuff to look at there that people may miss that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I will say, looking at this timeline, I would very much like to tighten it up any way we can to release funds sooner. Because what's happening is someone could be applying for a proposal at the end of August and not looking at getting the money till almost a year later. So it would be if there's a way. I mean, I'm not saying with this one, certainly. I mean, this is the way it is. But down the road, just trying to find ways where the time from when you apply to when you actually have the money is a bit shorter. And the only place I see a whole lot of slack in that is, for one thing, the time between when we make a decision and when the commission votes on it. So trying to coordinate our voting to the commission meeting so there's not a 6-week interval. And then again in that contracting process. So if we could in the future coordinate our recommendation time close to the commission meeting, and then also try to, as we've been discussing, shorten that time frame from when we approve it and when they can spend it, possibly through changing our OAR. So those are just things in the future, Reva, for us to kind of keep track on. Here we are. We want to be a nimble, accommodative, moving forward organization, and we don't want to have people waiting, a year for money that they applied for 9-10 months before. Mark Stern.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm going to say something and Reva, or Reva, you can chime right in. But I think part of what changed it was, my understanding was the department wanted the recommendations from OCRF 4 weeks in advance of the commission meeting, so it could be, so it could be included in their packet. So that's part of the reason why there's a 4 or 5 week time spread there between our decision date and the commission voting.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mark. I was gonna say that, but yeah, that's kind of what pushed that out. In the past, we've had like only a week in between the advisory committee recommendations and then taking it to the commission, which is, really quick turnaround for me with the materials and getting everything together. And they wanted it ahead of time so that they could review before well in advance of the meeting. So we were kind of sliding through, and they're no longer going to allow us to do that, unfortunately. All right, any other thoughts on this timeline for fall RFP?
Well, once again, Mark, you brought that up, and Riva was quite responsive and willing to change it, so we move things up. So that helps our applicants, and I think it's a better process.
Okay, great. And then the last thing I think on our agenda for today is to discuss, so last month we had a nice discussion about the funding cap and how the committee, you were all happy with how it was for the spring RFP, and you wanted to continue those same funding caps for fall. So the 50K for the non-drought projects, and then 140K for the drought projects that are going to address an aspect of drought for the state of Oregon. And then I had a follow-up for what the committee thought about our allocation of funds. If we wanted to keep it the same as last time, it would be 200,000. We're providing guidance to applicants on how much funding is available for each of these categories. And do you want to keep it the same, 200K for non-drought, and then about 800K for the drought-related projects, or do you want to make any adjustments there in your guidance with applicants on the funding that's available?
I think when we looked at the budget, that's what worked. It may be that the last one we might be able to bump up a little bit, but this leaves us a little bit of cushion, which I think is nice to have.
All right.
So
keep it as is.
Yeah, I wouldn't change that. Anybody have any different thoughts on that?
No, just the same thought you did. I thought we were looking at the available funds and what they were directed for, and I thought that's why we made the decision.
Okay, great. And then
I wonder about the wording of this, and I'm not sure where this is going, but it sounds like the highest priority is, because it's the only one that's mentioned, is outdoor equity. This doesn't really make me think that the 200,000 is going to go to conservation strategy projects.
I think, yeah, that's a good, I didn't pick that up. I think actually what it is non-drought, not so much outdoor equity.
Right.
It's non-drought. I think that's more what that 200, because that's money we have some flexibility on. And
right.
we don't on the drought money. It's got to be somehow tied to drought. And so we're spending that for basically non-drought, which does include a lot of times the outdoor equity ones, but I don't think that's the specific. I appreciate you bringing that up. I just didn't pick that up. That was my recollection of the cutoff. It wasn't necessarily just outdoor equity. It was basically, you can't really tie it to drought.
The way to make this a little more clear might be to start with the 800,000 for drought related, and then say make the second paragraph, and there's another 200,000 that's available for projects that are not drought related. or that can't be related to drought.
Mm.
I think that would be a little cleaner.
Okay, so put drought first and then non-drought after.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I like that. Good suggestion. Marat?
And if you're going to if this is going to go out to anybody and not just for us, then it should probably say why. You know, that we have this pool of money that's mandated to be for drought related projects, and
Mm.
because of that.
Mm.
So, but I don't know. I mean, this may just be for us to decide, in which case it doesn't make any difference.
Well, you could just put, because of our legislative mandate, approximately $800,000 will be granted that address the impact of drought.
Mm.
That pretty much says, because that's what it is. There's a mandate for us to spend that money from the legislature. So that might satisfy that.
Right.
Marat?
My question was, I couldn't remember how we ended up with 140,000 as the maximum grant request. If we only have 800,000 available, and what did we have last time? 80 projects or something. I'm just wondering if we should lower that to 100,000 or something so we could spread the wealth a little bit more.
Brad, I appreciate that. That 140 came up because, as I recall, 150 requires a whole nother level of, you got to do, there's a lot more hoops that Riva would have to jump through to give 150,000. So we ended up at 140, but I felt the same as you. There was a couple, I think one project that was 140,000, and I was really wishing that it was less. So I would be open to rethinking that. Part of the evolution of that was twofold. One is we don't want to have a whole lot, like so many projects at Riva, small number of projects. It's the same amount of work for Riva if they get $8,000 as if they get 140,000. So if we lower that too much, you end up with a whole bunch more projects. And so that was one of the reasons. Then 150 was the cutoff, so we went to 140. But with that all being said, I personally would be very comfortable with dropping that to about 100,000, which is serious money. And that would just maybe mean people would have to modify what they applied for. You know, we were also, I'm remembering this discussion, Sarah was a big part of it, is that you want to be involved in, excuse me, in some big high impact projects. And a lot of those will say, I'm not even going to bother if it's only $100,000. Well, there's not that much difference between 100,000 and 140. So I think we'll still get the high impact projects if you're able to give 100. But those were the reasons why we picked 140 last time.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess I'm also thinking that with a slightly lower amount, it also encourages more collaborative behavior in terms of getting other grants, you know, rather than us being the whole enchilada. But thank you. That makes sense.
Are you proposing we drop it to 100?
Well, I don't know if I'm proposing it, but I'm comfortable with whatever the group feels is reasonable.
Well,
I'll propose it if she doesn't, and then we can discuss.
well, I appreciate that proposal because I'd like to discuss that. It just seemed, honestly, I looked at it as like 140. That's just sort of a odd number. I mean, it's like, why 140? I don't think that it might increase the number of projects by one or maybe two if we drop it to 100. Because a lot of the projects still were in the $50,000 to $80,000 range, the ones that we funded and the ones that were asked for. Mark Stern?
I second Jane's proposal.
Great. Well then, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of moving it to 100. Looks pretty widespread. So Reva, does that help you?
That works.
Sorry that you're going to have a couple more projects you're going to have to wade through, but I think it's not going to be too much different. I just feel better about that. I appreciate two things. Was it Jane that brought up, thanks for picking up that way that's worded, and second, for bringing up the number, and for Moret's input on that. Okay, good. So we did do some changes there. You got all that, Reva?
I did, yeah. Thanks.
Thank
We
you.
will do 100,000 for the drought package fund projects, the new cap. And then, oh, you've probably seen on this. And that was just feedback from our last month's meeting from Tim Gresseth. Oregon Wildlife Foundation suggested that we add the average amount that was awarded, as it might be helpful for applicants to see that data, see that information, and then the percent funded for each section for non-drought and drought. So I was going to add that in.
Yeah, that helps people decide if it's worth their while to fill out the application.
Exactly. Yep. Anyone have any thoughts on that, or does that sound good to add that information in there for applicants? Okay. Great. Well, that's all I had.
Okay. Well, thank you, Reva. Thanks for putting that together. And of course, we just made more work for you, which we do every meeting. Thanks for that. I think that's it. I think we covered the important things today. Hopefully, I see Tim Greths is here. I think we still need to explore this partnership in more detail. Oh, that reminds me, Mark, I think we did reach out to Wyoming with the Wyoming Wildlife Fund, and Reva, didn't someone get back to us and we were going to set up a meeting to talk with them? It seemed like I saw an email response.
Yeah, we got a response from the communications director at the Wyoming Fish and Wildlife, and I think that next steps are going to be Sarah is going to help with coordinating that discussion with them.
Okay,
when I
great.
bring it up to her.
Maybe
Yeah.
But they were supportive. But they were supportive, Carl, and talking to us. So.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful as Sarah's planning this to maybe include Mark Labhart, if you're if you're able to do that. I think having you as a commissioner would be useful in that conversation.
Be glad to.
And then likewise, Tim Grethis, if we could have him engaged in that. Tim, is that something you might be interested in doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. So so Reva, talk to Sarah about that, and let's not let that one get by us. And of course, I'd like to be involved in that as well.
All right. Sounds good.
Great. I do have one last thing, sort of a housekeeping issue. I don't know, have you all been getting the note about how we have to, or Tim, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I just wanted, I was listening in when you were talking about the contracting process with awarded grants, and then the kind of the, I guess the collision with in-water work period, just generally speaking, availability of funds when you need them, for work to be performed in the same year. And I just can't concur strong enough that the more flexibility we were able to provide, it could provide to applicants in terms of when those funds were available, the greater likelihood that we're not pushing a project that could be completed in this year to the next one. And so I was wondering if is there any possibility, given that the commission is sort of the final arbiter of approval, given that the commission's voting in March, would the Department of Justice allow, I don't know what the constraint is, but could applicants, assuming that they spend within the parameters that are approved by the commission and they don't do anything outside what's been approved, wouldn't it maybe ideally would be possible for them to be able to obligate, some or commit some funds to the work? And that seems like that if you could get that permission, then you wouldn't have to mess around too much with your process. Just I guess it's just getting some sort of, I don't know where the permission comes from, but allowing applicants to expend against the budget that was approved by the commission. So I'll just stop there. I just know how important it is to we're one of those applicants sometimes where we're trying to get a project done, and if we had to push it into another year, that could be problematic from a cost perspective, from a contractual perspective, and just timing in general.
Yeah, Reeve, I guess that
Thanks, Tim.
that just emphasizes that this is an important issue. So I'm sure it's the same for the PFA. So let's maybe have a discussion with Sarah about this and the best direction to go for us to make it so that we're able to make that happen. Whose permission do we need to get, and how do we go about it? And I think that's a worthwhile thing to spend some time on.
Yeah, and we definitely have been having some of these discussions, trying to figure it out. One thing we have done, because there's kind of that hang up there with getting that fully signed contract to allow project grantees to start spending, is on a case-by-case basis. There's been a few exceptions I was able to slide through with some projects that were able to get kind of an amendment with contracts to allow them to do that. And so I've been able to kind of bend the rules for a few folks that really needed it, but it's not a across the board consistent thing yet. So yeah, I hear all the feedback, and
that sounds like more work for you to do that on
a
case basis. So it's better if we can find out what we would have to do to systematically change it and go that direction. I think that's the best route. So the one last thing I wanted to bring up is I've been getting these things from human resources about all these tests I need to take, and I can't log in. Are people able to log in to Workday, or have you even tried? I'm saying yes.
Kelly can, that's good, but
Anybody
Workday
else
is so
logged
tough.
into Workday? Or y'all
There's
just,
I had trouble with it, and Riva put me in touch with one of the tech people who had to change my password, and it's not easy. It seems like I've had a trouble every time I've tried to do it, but Riva knows who to put you in touch with to help it figure it out.
She connected me with him as well, and I still can't log in. So
it's a nightmare, Carl.
Okay, maybe I just ignore it, but it sounds like it's not good for anybody. So
Carl, are you using an authenticator app to get in?
Yeah, I tried on. Well, now I can't. As soon as I log in, it says you've tried too many times. Contact your administrator, which we've done, and nothing. There's been no resolution. So anyway, I'm out.
Carl, I'm gonna help figure that out for you. Hopefully we can get you in We could try to bug that same guy, or maybe there's someone else we can contact that can help
Well,
us
going
get in
with
there.
that guy didn't work.
So
Hmm.
Reva, I'm in the same boat. I do it. I've been doing this for 5 years, and every year I can't get in, and somebody has to help me
Oh,
get back
geez.
in. So maybe
Mm.
you can help me again because I can't get back in. It's just like it's got to be simpler than this, folks.
I'm
right,
sorry to
well,
hear you're having problems too.
It is a problem if there's things we're supposed to be doing, we're not able to. So, yeah, maybe this sounds like a systemic problem, Reva, and maybe there's somebody in whatever department does this kind of thing that could look at our whole global experience and see if there's a way to make it easier for everyone.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, there's just recently started a new so board administrator support group that the governor's office has just released like this month. And I've been getting some of the emails. And one of the things that they're going to offer support on is this workday issue because we've brought it up with them. So there's stuff in the works. In the meantime, before we have like their full support, you know, I'm going to continue helping figure out these issues. But yeah, it's definitely a systemic issue. You guys aren't the only ones that are having issues with Workday login. So I'm sorry about that. But
Well,
we'll get
thanks.
it figured out.
Thank you, Reva, for looking into that. All right. Well, is there anything else out there that we need to talk about? This is another great meeting. I appreciate everyone's input. It's as usual. It was great. I think we got some good insight on things. I really enjoyed that chum. I'm going to go learn about chum salmon a whole lot more. Isn't that it's amazing that here, I mean, that's part of like the frog in the boiling water. You just don't notice. I had no idea that there were tons of chum salmon that used to come to Oregon and there aren't anymore. And maybe that's something we can change. And I'm really proud that we are part of that process. So it makes being on this committee all the more worthwhile. So thank you all for your input and your insight, and look forward to the next meeting. Thanks, Reva.
Thanks,
Adios.
everybody.